The stars were wrong. That was the first thing Dr. Evelyn Carter noticed when she stepped onto the observation deck of the deep space research vessel Aether. The constellations, those familiar patterns she had memorized as a child, seemed off. Not by much, just a fraction of a degree, but enough to make her skin crawl. She told herself it was the distortion of the ship's viewport or the lingering effects of cryosleep, but deep down, she knew better. Something was out there, watching, waiting, and it had been for a very long time. The Aether had been sent to investigate a mysterious signal emanating from the edge of the solar system, near the orbit of Mercury. The signal was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, a low, resonant hum that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It defied all known laws of physics, oscillating between frequencies that shouldn't exist. The scientific community had dubbed it the Mercury signal, and it had sparked a frenzy of speculation. Some believed it was evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence, others thought it was a natural phenomenon, a quirk of the cosmos. Evelyn, however, suspected it was something far more sinister. She had been chosen to lead the mission because of her expertise in xenolinguistics and her work on the Voynich manuscript, a centuries-old text written in an unknown language. The manuscript had fascinated her for years, not because of its content, which remained indecipherable, but because of the way it made her feel. Every time she looked at its strange looping symbols, she felt a deep, primal unease, as if the text were alive and watching her. The Mercury signal evoked the same feeling, only amplified 1,000-fold. The Aether's crew was small, just 6 people, including Evelyn. There was Captain Marcus Hale, a stoic veteran of deep space exploration, Dr. Priya Patel, the ship's engineer, Dr. Alexei Volkov, a physicist specializing in quantum mechanics, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the pilot, and Dr. Elias Grant, a psychologist tasked with monitoring the crew's mental health. They were all brilliant, all dedicated, but Evelyn could see the tension in their eyes. They felt it too, the wrongness of the stars, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. The journey to Mercury took 3 months, during which the crew grew increasingly restless. The signal grew stronger with each passing day, its hum vibrating through the ship's hull like the heartbeat of some vast, unseen creature. Evelyn spent most of her time in the lab analyzing the signal and trying to make sense of it. She ran it through every algorithm, every decryption protocol she could think of, but it remained stubbornly incomprehensible. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was trying to communicate something terrible. When they finally reached Mercury, the tension on the ship was palpable. The planet loomed before them, a barren, cratered wasteland bathed in the harsh light of the sun. The signal was coming from a region near the planet's north pole, an area that had never been fully mapped. As the Aether descended into orbit, Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. The signal was no longer just a hum, it was a voice, whispering words she couldn't understand, but that filled her with an overwhelming sense of dread. "We're picking up something on the surface," Sarah said, her voice tight with unease. It's moving." Evelyn leaned over the console, her heart pounding. The sensors showed a massive structure buried beneath the planet's surface, its shape unlike anything natural. It was enormous, stretching for miles, and it seemed to pulse in time with the signal. As she stared at the screen, a single thought echoed in her mind: "We shouldn't be here." Captain Hale ordered a landing near the structure, and the crew suited up for the expedition. Evelyn's hands trembled as she fastened her helmet, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She tried to focus on the mission, on the scientific importance of their discovery, but the voice in her head wouldn't stop. "Turn back. Turn back. Turn back." The surface of Mercury was a nightmare. The heat was unbearable, even through the suits, and the landscape was a jagged, lifeless expanse of rock and dust. The structure loomed ahead of them, a dark, jagged silhouette against the sun's blinding light. As they approached, Evelyn realized it wasn't just a structure, it was a machine, ancient, incomprehensible, its surface covered in strange, pulsating symbols that seemed to shift and writhe as she looked at them. "What the hell is this?" Alexei muttered, his voice trembling. Evelyn didn't answer. She couldn't. The symbols were familiar, too familiar. They were the same ones she had seen in the Voynich manuscript, the same ones that had haunted her dreams for years. She reached out a gloved hand, her fingers brushing against the machine's surface. It was warm, almost alive, and she felt a jolt of energy shoot through her body. The voice in her head grew louder, more insistent, and she realized with a sickening certainty that it wasn't just in her head, it was coming from the machine. "We need to get inside," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The crew hesitated, but Captain Hale nodded. "Let's move." The entrance was a narrow, jagged opening that led deep into the planet's crust. The walls were smooth, almost organic, and they pulsed with the same strange energy as the surface. The air was thick with the hum of the signal, and Evelyn felt it vibrating in her bones. As they descended, the darkness grew thicker, more oppressive, and the crew's flashlights seemed to barely penetrate it. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. and she had to fight the urge to turn back. After what felt like hours, they reached a vast chamber, its walls covered in the same shifting symbols. In the center of the chamber was a massive, pulsating orb, its surface rippling like liquid metal. The voice was deafening now, a cacophony of whispers that seemed to come from every direction. Evelyn felt a wave of nausea wash over her, and she stumbled, clutching her helmet. "What is that thing?" Priya asked, her voice trembling. Evelyn didn't answer. She couldn't. She was too focused on the orb, on the way it seemed to beckon her, to call to her. She took a step forward, then another, her body moving almost against her will. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and she realized with a start that she could understand them. "We have been waiting," they said. "We have been waiting for so long." "Evelyn, stop." Captain Hale shouted, but it was too late. She reached out, her hand brushing against the orb's surface. The world exploded in light and sound. Evelyn felt herself being pulled into the orb, her body dissolving into nothingness. She was everywhere and nowhere, a part of something vast and incomprehensible. She saw things that defied description, things that should not exist. She saw the birth and death of stars, the rise and fall of civilizations, the endless cycle of creation and destruction. And she saw them ancient, eldritch beings that existed outside of time and space, their forms shifting and writhing in ways that made her mind scream in protest. "You have seen us," the voices said. "You have seen the truth." And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Evelyn was back in the chamber, her body trembling, her mind reeling. The orb was gone and the chamber was silent. The crew stared at her, their faces pale with fear. "What the hell just happened?" Captain Hale demanded. Evelyn opened her mouth to answer, but no words came out. How could she explain what she had seen? How could she make them understand the enormity of it? She looked down at her hands, expecting to see them shaking, but they were steady. Too steady. And then she realized she wasn't afraid anymore. The fear had been replaced by something else, something cold and calculating. "We need to leave," she said, her voice calm and measured. "Now!" The crew didn't argue. They turned and began to make their way back to the surface, their movements hurried and frantic. Evelyn followed, her mind racing. She had seen the truth and it had changed her. The beings, the ones who had been waiting, had shown her the universe as it truly was, a vast, uncaring void where humanity was nothing more than a fleeting speck. And they had given her a choice: to accept her insignificance and live in ignorance, or to embrace the truth and become something more. As they reached the surface and boarded the other, Evelyn knew what she had to do. The crew was already beginning to forget, their minds unable to comprehend what they had seen. But she remembered. She remembered everything. And she knew that the beings would be waiting for her, waiting for the day when she was ready to join them. The Aether left Mercury behind, its crew shaken but alive. Evelyn sat in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. They were still wrong, but she no longer cared. She had seen the truth and it had set her free. But as the ship drifted further into the void, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, something vast and ancient and hungry. And she knew deep down that it was only a matter of time before it found her again. The Mercury Monster was real, and it was waiting.